Welcome back to the mic check. I am JD, and we are trying some new things. We're trying some different things. Listen, I understand that every time I make a video, there's probably a different setup, but this is more than likely going to be the official setup for the channel, for my life. We're going to get some structure. We're going to get some structure in here, okay? So now, for those of you who have not been living under a rock, you would know that the world is kind of going through its own situation right now. Specifically, America. I probably watch politic content more than I've watched a sports team in my life. These last few months have been horrendous. I mean, for lack of better terms, I do try to stay as centered as possible, but honestly, manipulation is manipulation. Lying is lying. And when I see one side telling more lies than the other, it puts me in a place where it's just like, that's kind of weird. And it makes you look. Now, this isn't me saying that the Democratic Party has been completely upfront about every single thing in the book. And this also isn't me saying that Republicans have lied about every single thing in the book either. But I do come from the viewpoint of within this country, regardless of what political stance you have, the goal should always be to serve both sides in some capacity. And if you can't serve both sides, at least make sure that the other side isn't completely deprived of what they have worked their entire lives for also. Because if you consider yourself fighting for democracy and you consider yourself fighting for the American people are the ones who actually need to benefit from your decisions, not you and not your friends. So one of the biggest lies that this sitting administration has basically told, and it keeps playing in my head because it's so interesting. The biggest lie that this administration told us was that Project 2025 was a project that he had not heard of. It was just something that Democrats just pulled out their ass, and for some reason, everybody just believed that he was actually going to follow this plan, down to the T. In fact, he actually said that he had never heard of it. Like it was just something that was never mentioned to him once at all. I found a video. And the video was actually uploaded a year ago by a channel by the name of Holy Koolaid. This video has 522,000 views. This video is titled, I read Project 2025 so you don't have to. This man read the entire 900-page document and basically gave us the breakdown of what it was. And it's so interesting because looking back in retrospect from where we are now, everything is accurate. But I don't know, for somebody to sit here and say that they've never heard of Project 2025, somebody to sit here and say that they've never seen it, they don't even know what it is, they don't know who you're talking about, they don't know. They just play stupid. It's just interesting that everything that we're living today, or at least half of what we are living today, was actually implemented in this video. Yeah, I guess we just go ahead and get into the video, man. This is insane.
Unless you're living under a rock, you have probably at least heard about Project 2025.
Project 2025.
Project 2025.
Project 2025.
Project 2025.
Project 2025.
But what exactly is it? Is it actually a Republican plan to overthrow American democracy and establish a fascist dictatorship with unchecked power? Or is it simply a policy wish list by random conservative organizations that's been turned into an overhyped conspiracy by paranoid Democrats desperately trying to link this document to Donald Trump?
I won't lie. When they first talked about Project 2025, I thought they was trolling. I thought people was I thought somebody had just somebody in their basement just threw together a bunch of, crazy right-wing rhetoric, and they just they just trolled us. I legitimately thought, because Trump tried to make it so convincing that he knew nothing of it. And I just legitimately thought, and you know what? Jokes on me. Jokes on me for listening to what anything the carrot had to say. Because I just don't, the amount of times this man has lied, and it's so insane because he appeals to the Republican Party, and because the whole, white Christian nationalism thing, it's insane. As somebody who grew up inside of a black church, and I've been around a lot of bishops and apostles and just church people, priests and things of that nature, preachers. People who grow up inside an authoritarian household or religious group or whatever the case may be, they will literally listen to their leader. You cannot tell these individuals that their leader is a liar, untruthful. You cannot tell them anything about their leader. Like, no matter how hard you try, no matter how much you try to convince them, until they actually wake up and stop drinking the Kool-Aid, they will never admit to the fact that they are in a cult. cults are literally designed to keep the members out of finding out or at least realizing that they are in a cult. That's just the fact of the matter. But let's go ahead and get back to the video. I'm sorry.
Well, this last week, while I was sick in bed nursing a cold, I decided to read the entire thing because I either vehemently hate myself or I love torture. Probably the latter. Now, I often hear people blow things out of proportion, and I'm usually the one in my friend group telling people that no, the sky is not falling, and things aren't as bad as they think that they are. But after reading Project 2025, I've gotta say, it is way worse than you think it is. This 900-page document is a joint effort by 54 influential conservative organizations, 36 authors/editors, 25 of them are officials from Trump's own administration, and 276 contributors to plan a complete MAGA takeover of the USA. At least
Crazy thing is, had I known that his actual staff and cabinet members were involved in the actual like collaboration of the document, I would have known right then and there. Like, yeah, he's most definitely involved. Like I said, and the crazy thing is, New York knows. A lot of New Yorkers know that Trump is a liar. Like they grew up, especially the people who have been alive long enough to remember Trump and a lot of his. They know that Trump is a big liar. So it's funny talking to people from New York because New York hates Trump. I'm gonna be completely honest. They cannot stand that man. But I mean, sometimes a con man can give a con man a big enough stage, and I guarantee you he will fool most of mankind. I guarantee you he will fool most of mankind. Well, I wouldn't even say mankind, most of Americans. I'll say that because we're just so conditioned to listen to someone. We're so conditioned to just follow the leader and not actually think for ourselves. America really, really does lack critical thinking skills. Thinking as an individual has been basically shunned from birth. And we're basically just told to listen to someone. You go to school, you have to raise your hand before you can speak. In elementary school, we have to stay inside the line. Don't move out the line. Stay inside the line. We're told, you could be whatever you want. You can do whatever you want in life. You can become an astronaut. You can become the president of the United States. And then when you graduate, you find out that your bosses are on your neck 24/7. They just want you to do this, do that, follow the rules. Don't even think outside of the box. Stay within the realm of what we tell you to do. So we're told to follow someone, follow something. Even growing up, if you're a Christian, if you grew up Christian like I did inside a Christian household, you already know. I don't even have to explain that. You already know. The Bible is the end all be all. It is they of course they treat it as if it is the exact words of God, even though we know it is not the exact words of God, but it's just the end all be all. Follow it down to the T. Even if the people that are your leaders don't, you should.
140 of Trump's own staff, including nearly half of his cabinet secretaries, have direct involvement with the project. But what is Project 2025? In its opening pages, it refers to itself as a unified effort by the conservative movement, a plan of action to go into effect the second that the next conservative president is sworn into office. And their goal is to assemble an army of aligned, vetted, trained, and prepared conservatives to go to work on day one to deconstruct the administrative state, to give.
And this is actually something funny I told my wife, and we were talking about it. I've only been alive for 25 years, okay? I have not seen every single presidency there is to see. I've only seen a select few. But for those select few that I have seen, I have never seen someone get into office and just sign executive orders as if they're live. Like oh, Jesus. Their life depended on it. On one end, you will sit here and say, "Oh, well, that he's just proactive. He wanted to get in and he wanted to make changes because he's just so dedicated to the cause and he's just so." And it's like, not necessarily. When you are the president of the people and you are the people's leader, you do have to realize that every decision that you make, every order that you put into law or everything that you basically do is either going to gain someone something or strip someone else of something. It's really a game of checks and balances and making sure that, the government doesn't completely collapse, but you have a good balance between the people having some type of quality of life and the government continuing to operate efficiently. when he got into office, I don't know what in the hell he was thinking. I don't, there were things that were just getting signed into law that it was like, and I mean, he did say it. He did say that he was, his second presidency, if he became president, he was going, it was going to be a revenge thing. And we've seen it. We've absolutely seen it. But I mean, things as simple as like tariffs. Okay, not even realizing the fact, and most I don't even understand how MAGA doesn't realize it, but you do realize that tariffs are going to be paid. It's the cost of the tariffs is going to be passed down to the consumer. No person outside of this country is going to, import things into this country and take that extra cost. They're just not. They're just going to charge us extra for it. And I mean, that's the smart thing to do business wise. But you know what?
Give Trump unfettered power to tear down America and rebuild a Christian nationalist dictatorship in its place.
Christians, get out and vote. Just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed. It'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you. Get out. You got to get out and vote. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
But how will
As an American who is supposedly supposed to be living in a democracy, the last thing you want to hear from any leader is get out and vote. This will be your last time having to vote. You won't have to vote anymore. And then it's funny because I mean he knows that the white Christian nationalism is like his target demographic. So it's funny that he attempts to try to basically portray himself as a Christian when he can't even name a scripture in the Bible. I kid you not. Here's the clip.
Okay. You mentioned the Bible. You've been talking about how it's your favorite book. And you said, I think last night in Iowa, some people are surprised that you say that. I'm wondering what 1 or 2 of your most favored Bible verses are and why.
I wouldn't want to get into it because to me that's very personal. When I talk about the Bible, it's very personal. So I don't want to get into verses. I don't want to get into.
There's no verse that means a lot to you that you think about or cite.
The Bible means a lot to me, but I don't want to get into specifics.
Even to cite a verse that you like.
No, I don't want to do that.
You're an Old Testament guy or a New Testament guy?
Probably equal. I think it's just an incredible. The whole Bible is an incredible. I joke. Very much so. They always hold up the Art of the Deal. I say my second favorite book of all time. But I just think the Bible is just something very special.
He cannot name a scripture in the Bible. And the reporter even asked him to just give a name, just give a name of a book in the Bible. If this is something that you actually believe in, just give us something, And I've argued with Republicans before and they were like, well, if you were 70 years old, you couldn't, I literally have 70-year-old grandparents who can recite the Bible in 2 seconds. It doesn't take all of that. Now, I mean, word from word, some people might switch the Bible up, they might say some stuff, but at least have a scripture in mind that you could just at least bring up. You couldn't even think of an actual book in the Bible. Nobody has to say you have to say Ecclesiastes, or you don't have to even think of none of the hard names. You could have just said John. You could have just you could have said the simplest things, but you just didn't. You did not. So I don't know how white Christian nationalists have let this man fool them so much to the point to where they really believe the word of God is what he is acting upon when it comes to his actions. I just don't see it. I don't understand it.
they accomplish this? Well, they plan to stack Trump's staff and cabinet with MAGA loyalists, firing massive numbers of civil servants, and by consolidating executive power in the hands of Trump, making the Department of Justice and the FBI directly accountable to the president, allowing him to weaponize them, and it would remove their capacity to act independently. This would basically remove very essential checks and balances against presidential abuse of power.
What Project 2025 articulates is the idea that the president should be the one directing the activities of the Department of Justice, even if that means that the president will not be investigated or that the DOJ will be sent to attack the president's.
AKA the Department of War. It's the Department of War now. He wants it to be the Department of War, also known as the Department of Justice.
Political enemies.
We will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country.
And by
radical left thugs, aka black people, Hispanic people, anybody that does it. Because I mean, we have to actually be honest here. Let's really be honest here. When people think about Democrats, when people think about leftists and things of that nature, they're thinking about everybody that does not look like them. And I try not to like touch too much on race, but we cannot pretend like race isn't a huge determining factor in this country. This country was built on racism. It literally was. If you cannot admit that fact, we have already lost you in the conversation. One of the biggest trading practices was people, literal people. And those people went on to produce countless of hours of work and produce countless amounts of wealth for individuals who are the actual ancestors of the people who kind of sit in some of these roles today. I'm not going to say all, because I do understand that, Democrats aren't just black people. I understand that they're just not minorities. But I am saying that the people who have the ideology of the white Christian nationalism now, usually is because it was passed down from generation to generation to generation to generation. And nobody decided to break the mold. Nobody decided to stand out. Nobody decided to be the good person and stand on the good side of history. They just decided to continue to do what their Meemaw and Pawpaw told them to do. And that's why we end up places like we are now.
Stating an executive order called Schedule F, the president would be able to replace any nonpartisan civil servants at will with loyalist cronies who will do his bidding and won't challenge him. And remember, Trump already stacked the Supreme Court with justices who've already demonstrated that their loyalty lies not with the American people or with the US Constitution, but with him and his agenda, ruling that the president is essentially above the law. In his last term, he demonstrated that he would fire anyone who dared to question his agenda.
You're fired. Get out of here.
And he viciously turned on any Republican who followed their conscience rather than the MAGA party line. The result? Almost all of them lost their re-election bids or opted to resign or retire in the face of impossible uphill re-election battles without Trump's endorsement. And the remaining Republicans in Congress learned to fall in line or they'd get the boot. Once Trump gains absolute power, the Project 2025 plan goes on to outline his next steps, and it calls for the largest deportation of immigrants in American history, which would...
So, like, here's the interesting thing, because I see a lot of people who say, like, man, like, what is going on? Why isn't anyone actually fighting back against them? Why isn't anybody? Because we have to remember, as we're watching this video, we have to remember that this was past tense, or at least this video was made in a past time. So all of the stuff that he's talking about hasn't happened yet in this time period. We know now what's what, but then it wasn't, reality yet. People are saying now, like, why isn't he fighting back? When you have someone who is already too powerful, when he has already taken the highest seat of the land, and he has already positioned everyone around him who are just loyalists, these people have families, these people have, lives, they have people that they take care of, they have, the whole nine. A lot of these people are simply afraid. A lot of these judges and people who they're simply afraid. They're afraid that their livelihoods are going to get ripped from them if they decide to go against him. They're afraid that, just think of the amount of times people have been called to be investigated by Trump and his administration simply because they went against him. The ones who decided to have some backbone and the ones who decided to try to go against what he had to say, think about how many times they have been shot down and basically called to be investigated. And then when it comes to the mass deportation, I don't need to say more on that. Honestly, we know what's going on.
Tear millions of families apart. And it straight up states that they intend to arrest immigrants anywhere in the US without warrant. I mean, this is straight up Gestapo level papers, please madness. Oh, and it also says that ICE will simply rely on the good judgment of officers in the field to avoid inappropriate situations.
Recently, Chicago just basically went through this entire situation. The apartment complex in Chicago, where ICE agents literally told people that whether they had warrants or not, they were going to be detained. And if they did have warrants, they were not going to be released, whether they were immigrants or not. If you're going to barge into a predominantly black apartment complex, arrest people, they didn't have a choice. They didn't have a search warrant. They didn't, No court told them, hey, you can go and knock on these people's doors and pull them out of their homes. How is this legal? How is this even moral?
What could possibly go wrong? Page 60 calls for the reversal of progress made in the areas of racial and gender equality. And this plan would be a massive attack on women's reproductive freedoms as well, calling for abortion surveillance, reversing FDA approval for and attempting to ban mifepristone. You know, the pill that most women take when they don't want to give birth and would rather just miscarry when their first trimester fetus is the size of a brainless peanut? Project 2025 attempts to restrict women's reproductive rights at a national level through multiple initiatives, including defunding Planned Parenthood, cutting federal funding to pro-choice states, eliminating funding for pro-choice women's healthcare programs globally, and establishing a pro-life task force. Okay, so they want to ban all abortions, but they're at least in favor of contraception, right? I mean, the best way to lower abortion rates is to expand comprehensive evidence-based sex education.
Wrong.
Page 477 calls for the outright abolition of any approved evidence-based sex education curriculum. But as teen pregnancy rates skyrocket, at least they're gonna step in and support new mothers, right?
Wrong.
Page 489 demands the government prioritize married men and women over any other family type. And pages 284 and 451 advocate for stripping support for single mothers. Because, you know, Jesus hated widows and would totally want unwed mothers to suffer. Oh, and now that some states are starting to classify abortions as murder, you'll be happy to learn that they're also planning to expand the death penalty. I wish I was making this up. Fertility treatments more restrictive, and even aims to outright ban life-saving stem cell research. Because, you know, that little clump of cells that's left over from IVF is a soul in a petri dish, and every sperm is sacred. Project 2025 is dripping with Christian nationalist rhetoric, and repeatedly talks about Judeo Christian values and restoring the family to one man and one woman. It paints members of the LGBT community as predators, calls for Trump to reinstate his ban on trans patriots serving in the military, and uses extreme fear-mongering against trans people by equating transgenderism with pornography that is invading our schools, before calling on the next conservative president to outlaw said pornography, imprisoning teachers and librarians over banned ideas.
So, as you guys can tell, a lot of the stuff that he's talking about right now has already been implemented. There are countless of states who are beginning to ban pornography for people who are under the age of 18, or at least they're basically requiring you to validate your age. And then as far as like the whole war against trans people thing, he has most definitely made that known, especially within the military. There have been countless of people who have been released of duty simply because of their beliefs and the things that they do, and you know, the way that they love. And I just personally don't think that has anything to do with your patriotism. I don't think that has anything to do with your ability to fight and defend this country. And you know, but apparently it does to them. So
this crackdown on free speech is absolutely totalitarian in nature, outright prohibiting any school employee from even referring to a student by any name or pronoun that differs from the exact one that's printed on the student's birth certificate, even if the students ask them to. And it calls for the termination of anyone who even participates in a critical race theory or diversity, equality, and inclusion initiative. And it's not just the LGBT community that they see as a threat to the traditional family structure. Page 5 and 6 accuse social media platforms of fraying children's bonds with their parents and siblings, stating that federal policy cannot allow this industrial-scale child abuse to continue.
Now this is where I don't, because I don't necessarily lean completely left. I do believe that at a certain age, a child needs to be able to have some type of maturity, or, you know, a person has to have some type of, or reach a level certain, oh, I'm sorry, reach a certain level of maturity in order to understand who they want to be, who they want to be called, you know, things of that nature. So I do believe that you have to have some type of level of maturity in order to even have that conversation. Because most kids are going to, you know, I probably wanted to be identified as an astronaut when I when I was 6 years old, you know. So it's like, that's one thing that I do feel like, you know, allow the kids to be sure of what they want to be before, you know, just completely giving in. But at the same time, I do believe that there are a lot of children who are very forward thinking, who are very mature, and I mean, if it's something that is just wished upon from them, if it's something that the parents have talked to them about, and it's something that they bring forth to the school, I say, why not? I mean, at the end of the day, it does not change your life. And I think a lot of people have to realize that anything that anybody else does not affect you whatsoever. If there's something that you do not like seen out in public, you can leave. If there's something that you do not seen on TV or whatever, you can cut it off. At the end of the day, other people's lives should not affect you as much as people make it seem that it does. But everybody's nosy. Everybody wants to be in everybody else's business. Everybody wants everybody to live the same ways that they do. And it's stupid. It's dumb. And it's it's a threat to democracy. And also with the whole, fraying children's bonds with the parents and siblings and everything like that, I really just feel like this is a whole bunch of gray area to simply say that. Like, I understand, like, on the surface level, this sounds great. This sounds amazing. We want to bring back the relationships with their parents and siblings. We want to get kids off of phones. I understand that. I trust me, I get it. But at the same time, those parents can take those phones. At the same time, those parents can actually do things in order to make sure the parents have the power to do a lot, but instead they depend on everything else and everybody else and the government to do it for them. In this case, this just sounds like we don't want our children aware of what is going on. We do not want our children aware of life outside of the home, life outside of us. We don't want our children to know anything besides what we tell them, and that's dangerous. That is very dangerous. I understand that seeing certain things before you want your children to see them can be scary. I get that. And I understand. I mean, I trust me when I say that you can make actions to prevent that. However, I am not going to strip my child of knowledge beyond the household simply because I'm afraid that they're going to find out that there is a life outside of this authoritarian household that has been telling me to pray until my eyes are shut every single night, when whole time I probably just needed therapy. I probably just needed to go somewhere and talk to somebody, and because I was probably touched as a child or whatever, and you're just telling me to pray about it and ask God for forgiveness. What?
And yet, oddly enough, it says nothing about Catholic priests. Now, the Heritage Foundation, the main organization behind this plan, knows that the better educated you are, the less likely you are to be religious or to support Christian nationalism / a theocratic government takeover, and the more likely you are to be open-minded and support a secular government and a pluralistic, tolerant society. So they've put measures in place to erode the education system in the US, including the dismantling of the Department of Education itself, stating federal education policy should be limited and ultimately the federal Department of Education should be eliminated.
We should abolish the Department of Education.
The plan promotes voucher programs to fund private religious schools and unregulated homeschool programs with taxpayer funds, which have little to no government oversight and often perpetuate young earth creationism, flat earth nonsense, and evolution denial. And leveling up its totalitarian rhetoric, it further states that any state, city, and counties, school boards, union bosses, principals, and teachers who simply disagree with this voucher proposal should be immediately cut off from federal funds. And in addition, free educational programs like NPR and PBS are to be stripped of their funding, because apparently their science and evidence-based educational programs didn't agree with extreme right-wing propaganda. And how can you indoctrinate an informed populace? Finally, student loan forgiveness programs / relief efforts are to be rolled back. So don't worry, you can continue paying your student loans for the rest of your life. Yay! In keeping with Republican traditions, Project 2025 is steeped in climate change denial. On page 368, it aims to roll back the progress made towards cutting carbon emissions. Page 418 aims to slash green legislation protecting the environment. There are plans to cut funding for clean renewable alternative fuels, and even calls for a whole government unwinding of the progress that Biden made in combating climate change, referring to it as climate fanaticism. Then again, who needs to worry about a runaway greenhouse effect destroying the only planet that we have when you're 80 years old and Jesus is coming back any minute now?
Jesus is coming.
Yo.
Which is why they're also disbanding the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. Is it just me, or does this feel a lot like when Trump dismissed the Obama administration's pandemic response team right before the COVID outbreak? Page 372 calls for reversing our internationally agreed on decades-long push for gradual nuclear disarmament by building back up a nuclear arsenal.
Man, it's so much. It is so much stuff that has happened in the last few months. And I want to get to some of the comments. I want to read some of the comments, but you guys, dude, I am going to put the link to this video inside the comments below so you guys can actually watch it, the full length of the video. But if you have not noticed or seen that all of this stuff is happening, it is already in effect. I don't know what to tell you. I really don't know what to tell you. But let's get to some of these comments really quickly. Monisha Dutta, I think 7004 says, "You won't have to vote anymore" is a horrifying line. And that's very true. I mean, what does that mean? What are you saying? This person said, "I thought Hill was supposed to happen after I died." That's hilarious. This person said, "This was done 11 months ago, and now in October 2025, lots of these things mentioned are happening." Someone said, "Please do an update on this and highlight everything that happened to this point with Project 2025 mandates." I do agree. Somebody said, "I'm honestly convinced we all died during COVID, and this is some strange afterlife." Somebody said, "I too thought so many people were being hyperbolic about Project 2025, and then I read it for myself and was like, holy wouldn't it be the epitome of irony if one day Mexico and Canada closed their borders to countless numbers of Americans seeking asylum from the Republican?" This is what frightens me the most. Me and my wife are actually working on leaving America. And I don't know. I feel like a lot of us want out, and a lot of us don't necessarily have a plan on how to get out at some point in time. But my fear is that if we don't do it fast enough and soon enough, countries are going to just stop taking people from America. They're going to say, "No, you guys voted for it. You guys stay over there." Please don't do that. All of us didn't vote for this shit. We didn't. A lot of us. Yeah, come on now. Please don't do that. Don't do that. I wish I could find somebody who actually supports Trump in these comments, but I don't think I will, because these people, anything that actually makes too much sense, they're just not going to they're not even going to try. I don't get it. I really don't. I have been a conservative Republican since 1972, and I will say that I have learned so much from this channel. In my opinion, you learn and stay intelligent when you step out of your comfort zone and realistically always challenge your belief system. And Project 2025 should scare the hell out of every American. You know what? This is probably the closest we're going to get to a Republican actually saying something about Project 2025 in this video. Thank you guys for watching this video. Let me know what you guys think about Project 2025. Let me know how this, all of these rules and laws and executive orders have affected you personally. I would love to, just have conversation, have some good dialogue inside the comments. The video that we reacted to will be inside the description below. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Thank you.